Hello and welcome to Tree Speech, a podcast where we get to know one another and our world one tree at a time. I'm your host, Dory Robinson. In our last episode, we began exploring the 9/11 survivor tree, the little Callery Pear that could. Ronaldo Vega, the Senior Director of Design and Construction for the National September 11th Memorial and Museum, shared his journey with the tree, from removing it at Ground Zero in October 2001 through facilitating her return in 2010. What if you could ask the survivor tree for her perspective on that journey of healing, regrowth, and renewal? What if she could tell you herself about her road to recovery? This is exactly what author Cheryl Somers Aubin aimed to do when she set out to write her book, The Survivor Tree. I interviewed Cheryl because I was so curious by how this tree inspired her and how she chose to tell its story. To speak for this tree. "9/11 brings up so much on so many levels, thoughts and ideas that we were processing and news. And then you learn that there's a survivor tree. When did you become aware?
So I was driving up to Massachusetts with my family, and my husband was driving. We stopped at one of these rest stops. I picked up a USA Today, just picked it up and read every single word, as you're driving through Connecticut and there's traffic. And below the fold on the inside of page 3 was this little article this big that said tree replanted at site of terror attack. And I hadn't heard of this tree. I didn't know anything about this tree. And so I turned to my husband. I'm sorry. And I said, I'm supposed to write this book. I just felt like I was supposed to write this book. And then I kept getting signs. Like one time I was just driving my car and the music went off. And it was just an announcer. He said, it is 9/11. And there was no more music. And then the music came back, and I thought, he's just telling us the time. Or it's 9/11. And so I said, okay, I'll write this book. And I hired Sheila Harrington, who was the illustrator, who did a beautiful job with illustrations, really beautiful, was able to convey my words and images.
How did you know that you wanted it to be a children's book?
Technically, the classification is picture book for all ages. I thought that adults read it on one level and children read it on another level. In fact, when I speak at schools, often I get thank yous from all the kids. Sometimes, like one boy wrote, my dad was supposed to be in the towers and he was sick that day. It's just really, it's touching and it's meaningful.
Part of the reason we created the podcast was that through trees, we're able to share stories. That is a way that we ground ourselves with one another.
Well, I have to tell you, since you invited me to this podcast, I've been thinking about trees right and left. I think about trees all the time. I think about them all the time. When I was a young girl in California, we had orange groves in our backyard. So we would just take the oranges and eat them. And it brought back that memory. And then we moved around a lot. One of our houses, we had a pine tree. And man, I climbed that pine tree. I got covered with sap. It was fun and, climbing up to the top and looking around. So, and even out my back window, we're on a hill. So I look out literally on the leaves and I feel like I'm in a treehouse.
Oh my gosh, that's so lovely. All the trees you mentioned really engage the senses.
Yeah.
Oranges, the pine, the sap. Yeah, everyone has a tree.
I almost feel like the tree chose me. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm so honored to have been able to tell the story. Boy, did I worry about how I was going to tell this.
You made an incredibly brave decision to address an intentional choice to address trauma in the book, in a picture book for all ages. What led to that decision?
Well, I thought it was going to be a picture book. And it's interesting because Mine was the first one, but there are other books that really deal with the attacks. Buildings coming down, people dying, jumping out of windows. And I thought, I don't want to do that because this is a story of hope. And so outside of the very first page, when I say the Twin Towers came down, I don't speak about the attack again. Although on the second page, one of the neat things that happened is that some of the workers at the nursery, they brought blocks that represented the World Trade Center as like a little memorial.
The decision to address trauma with unbelievable grace and kindness, to make space for that, to talk about this, and what better way than through a tree.
So yes, and I should back up and tell you that I met with a child psychologist because I said, I'm trying to figure out the right way because I don't want to traumatize anybody reading this book. I don't want anybody to be scared or upset reading this book. So how do I handle the stages of trauma with this? So she really worked with me, Mary Kerrigan, and I was so grateful to her. So she helped me figure out how to gently put these things in so people could follow the story.
The whole journey of the survivor tree was one of collaboration. The tree itself, the book, everyone had to reach out to a different kind of specialist for different kinds of things. Right. So it certainly makes sense and is very wise to reach out to a child psychologist. Who and what inspired the characters in the book? Because you get very specific about them.
I do. So when I decided to write this book, I did certainly a lot of research about Callery Pear trees, and I found Richie Cabo's name. He was very generous with his time, and he had, for the most part, cared for the tree the whole time it was in. That's why he represents all the workers who helped with the tree. He's one of the first people I sent a book to, and he was like, Cheryl, that's great. So he's really special. And then he put me in touch with Ron Vega. And Ron, as you interviewed before, who I love, was the one who brought the tree from the nursery to the 9/11 Memorial Plaza.
There's so much about the memorial that's very clean and symmetrical, and everything about the tree is chaos.
Right,
It's like limbs all over the place. To me, that certainly speaks to a journey of survival. It's not clean.
Exactly. And I usually go up once a year for a book signing. I didn't go certainly this past year, but the year before when I was there, it was right after a group of school children had been there. So they each had been given a leaf and a piece of string. So they wrote a message on the leaf like, thank you for surviving, or I'll never forget you. They tied it on the railing that goes around. So when I was there, the entire railing was covered with these messages to the tree from these kids. It was very touching.
That is beautiful. So thoughtful. What was the reaction to the book after it was published?
I learned about the survivor tree on September 23rd, 2010. And then I had a book in my hands by July 29th. I'm not kidding you, 24 hours a day, it seemed like. One of the things that I worked hard on in the book was, how do you tell the passage of time over 9 years? And I got the idea to do it by seasons. I have gotten good response and nice reviews, and people resonate with this story. This book is about the 9/11 survivor tree, but it's also for anyone who goes through any kind of trauma.
The idea to mark the passage of time the way we actually mark the passage of time, instead of through a computer or a calendar, through the seasons, because that is how we heal. It does take a lot of time. One of the things that was so potent about the book and is so potent about the tree is it takes almost 10 years for the tree to return to the site, for the tree to be fully healed. Mm-hmm. And it has a few setbacks along the way.
Right. So in the book, I try to write about the survivor tree. She's still feeling scared, but she's starting to feel a little bit better. So I try to go back and visit those feelings, even as she's healing and getting better.
I love that she's honest. It's that she's scared. She's taking in things. She's upset. Why can't she be in her original home? The absolute most potent line to me, it says, she saw the strength she'd given him and realized that she mattered. This is such a beautiful, powerful line. What strength do you derive from the survivor tree?
So I've been thinking about this question. Now, on the page you're mentioning, there's a fireman who comes and visits the tree in the nursery. And that actually happened. First responders would find the tree and just go and visit the tree. I know. So I think, like many of us, we can just, go along with our lives and think, oh, I don't matter that much, or whatever I went through doesn't matter. And then for someone to come visit the tree and for her to think, my experience, what I went through, is helping someone else. There, she's sick, she's not sure, and she's been through all this. But then someone comes to her and says, gosh, you really matter. You matter. So I think she just really matters. And the first time I saw the tree, I reached up and I touched her, the older part of her branch, the part that had been cut. And then I ran my hands along the smoother, the newer part of the branch. And then I cried. It was very, very emotional for me to go visit the tree. And I think that this story, this tree, represents hope. No one can be alive today that hasn't gone through some kind of really difficult time or true trauma. This tree goes through an incredibly horrific and frightening time, but makes it through. Things will never be the same for this tree. It won't be the same. But she feels a certain peace with her new normal.
Something you said resonates with me, that the tree, she matters simply because she is, not because she gives off a lot of fruit, not because she creates this amount of shade. It's not about what she produces. Her existence just by being matters. And that's also this important lesson that's hidden in the book. Maybe it's the secondary lesson, but it's also this important lesson just by being matters.
Right. I actually did a book signing on the 10-year anniversary, and it happened to be for Voices of September 11th. That group is for family members who lost someone. I was signing books, and there happened to be a chair next to me. And as I signed books, they'd all come and sit here next to me and tell me their story. There was strength in them for being able to tell their story. It was hard to listen, but I had to be present. So my book and I had to be present. Then we had to just acknowledge and witness what they had all gone through, losing a family member. And they would come back, they'd read it, come back to me the next day and say, I love this book. I love the true story.
That is part of the role of the survivor tree now. People do go to the tree and share all their emotions and their thoughts in that space. It creates a space. Do you look at trees differently since learning about the survivor tree and writing about her?
I have a greater respect and awareness of trees now and what they can do. And then also I have an enhanced appreciation for nature now that I don't think I ever had before.
I love that you turn to the natural world and ground us in the natural world. When we think of 9/11, we think of steel, we think of, rubble,
Concrete.
we think of concrete. Yes. And you turn to us and say, trees, birds, natural sounds,
Right.
The passing of the seasons, you bring us back to the world we live in and reminding us of these things that teach us life continues somehow.
There is a connection and a kindness between a person and nature, certainly the tree and the sargent, and that connection, certainly strengthens over time.
Which brings me back to the Callery Pear tree, to the survivor tree, because as soon as it moved to the nursery, a bird moved into the Callery Pear tree and just made its nest there.
And it was a mourning dove.
And a dove, of course, representing peace. What are your thoughts regarding the survivor tree in this 20-year anniversary of 9/11?
I am so happy that she's still here.
There's something about having a living memorial that is very different than a beautiful but staid structure. I think there's something about a living memorial that grows and is a living thing that has its own story to tell.
Right. There's the tree, and there's the story of hope and healing.
Well, Cheryl, thank you for all the work that you've done to create this book, and thank you for sharing it with so many people. It's really a gift.
Thank you so much. Really, I've loved talking about this tree, and thank you for sharing the story of this tree. I have just really enjoyed this.
The Survivor Tree's story reaches far past the 9/11 Memorial Plaza and into the world, thanks to the Survivor Tree Seedling Program. Launched in 2013 as a partnership between Bartlett Tree Experts of Stamford, Connecticut, and the John Brown High School in Queens, New York, the memorial gives seedlings from the Survivor Tree to communities that have endured tragedy. Some of the recipients include Puerto Rico, Parkland, Florida, Las Vegas, Nevada, Christchurch, New Zealand, and more recently, the Norway communities of Oslo and Utoya, and 5 hospitals throughout New York City's 5 boroughs in honor of the healthcare workers responding to the pandemic. Seedlings from the Survivor Tree have been given to communities committed to nurturing them and ensuring that they continue to serve as landmarks, symbolizing resiliency and healing. The pear tree has potent symbolism for many cultures around the world. In China, it represents longevity. Pears were considered a sacred fruit to the Egyptian goddess Isis, as well as the Greek deities Hera and Aphrodite. Pear trees were introduced to the United States from Asia in the early 1900s as an alternative to native pears that were subject to severe fire blight. By the 1960s, the Callery pear became used by landscapers as ornamental trees, because they could grow quickly, were easily transported, and were inexpensive. When Lady Bird Johnson planted one in downtown Washington, D.C., its popularity across the country grew. Callery pears are usually small trees with a lifespan of about 70 years. They feature dense clusters of white blossoms, which, though beautiful, smell like rotting fish. The pungent odor is not its only problematic element. The tree's branches are prone to splitting during storms or high winds. They have tough, injurious thorns, and worse yet, they choke out native plants without providing food for insects. Birds, however, happily eat their fruit, then disperse the seeds where the trees then grow aggressively, causing an imbalance in an area's ecosystem. For all these reasons, many communities now regard the Callery pear as an invasive species. Pear trees are a combination of contradictions. Beautiful but odorous, ornamental yet invasive. Regardless, or perhaps because of her complexity, the Survivor Tree has inspired millions of people, from the rescuers to the horticulturists, the architects to visitors. Quietly and powerfully, she tells her story of recovery, reminding us that there are signs of hope, even in still and humble places. Cheryl spoke about how the Survivor Tree was a symbol of strength for the many responders who worked in and around Ground Zero in the days after September 11th. I spoke with a volunteer firefighter from the Boston area who went down to New York City at that time, visual artist George Middleton. George's birthday also happens to fall on September 11th, and he told me his thoughts on his unique connection and perspective on this day.
9/11 certainly altered my feeling for my own birthday, but I also took it as something to add to the overall feeling that I have for that historical event and my involvement with it. I feel that that was no accident. But I should say this, that sounds overly important. And I only mean to say that privately in my own mind and heart, I'm glad that my birthday is the same day, because I don't want to ever forget 9/11. I don't want to ever forget the people and the sacrifice and all of that. So privately, for me, it's a good thing that's the same day.
Being able to serve his community has always been important to George, and he spent 28 years as a call firefighter and EMT. After 9/11, he was deployed to New York City to assist in the relief and recovery of the city as part of a peer support team. This episode's sapling story comes from him. Let's listen.
All right. Well, I've got this favorite tree, and this species has kind of followed me around for a good portion of my adult life. In other words, wherever I lived, there seemed to be a stand of these trees. And being a nature lover myself, I'll spend time just observing things, watching things. And in one of the places I lived, I had the good fortune that where I had my bed situated, there was a nice window looking out at this group of what I guess I'm going to call cottonwood, but I can't verify that yet. So as I looked at it day after day in this particular location, when I'd wake up, sometimes I noticed when it was a day without any wind whatsoever, I'd be looking at this tree, and there might be one leaf on that tree moving around while the rest of them were still. But what was odd to me is that the movement of that one leaf tended to be some kind of rapid, circular, extended all the way out on its stem kind of movement that would go on for sometimes as much as a half a minute, sometimes continually. And I couldn't relate it to anything that I knew or sensed about the kind of day it was, the atmosphere. I didn't really investigate it beyond that because being spirit inclined, I kind of saw it as, well, it's some kind of sign. It's some kind of indication of activity in a more spiritual realm. So just to finish the story, I've lived in 3 or 4 locations for extended periods of time that had a similar stand of these trees. Not always as easily visualized while I'm laying back on my bed. Sometimes I'd have to actually be in my studio or a different room or even outside to get a glimpse at them. But the consistent pattern to me, looking back now, is that how many times this same tree species has been where I'm living. So to me, that is a mystery, and I see it in sort of magical terms. So when I was posed the question, what is a tree that you identify with in some way? This is the tree that popped into my head. And so where I live now, we've got a nice clump of those trees outside that indeed I can observe while laying on my bed.
After recording this interview, we learned that the tree George is referring to is a quaking aspen. Also referred to as a trembling aspen, it's symbolically linked to the mourning dove and often represents eloquence, protection, and heroism. This season, we are exploring what it means to speak for the trees. We are uplifting people who stand up for them, who write their stories, champion them, and are able to hear what message they have to give. Both Cheryl and George say that the trees spoke to them, that they received a sort of sign from them. Tree friends, the next time you are able, I encourage you to take a moment and listen to a tree. It's not as hard as you may think. Step outside, take a deep breath in, and allow your mind to quiet down and focus on the tree. You may hear wind, rustling leaves, the hum of city life, or the silence of your own thoughts. What do you think the trees are saying? Do they have a message for you? To learn more about Cheryl Somers Aubin, visit cherylaubin.com, and to learn more about the book, go to thesurvivortree.com. Cheryl donates all her profits to charity. We recommend you find it at your local independent bookstore. To learn more about visual artist George Middleton, visit georgemiddleton.com. Sharing stories about trees leads to unique connections and conversations. We invite you, tree lovers, to be a part of these conversations by submitting a story about any tree in your life. If you have a sapling story to share, please leave us a voice message on our anchor page. The link will be in our show notes and at our socials. Of course, written stories are great too. You can email us by going to treespeechpodcast.com or on Instagram at treespeechpodcast. This is also where you can find our show notes, learn more about our guests, and featured trees. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please like us on social media and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. This episode was recorded in Massachusetts on the native lands of the Wabanaki Confederacy, Pennacook, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket people, in New York on the land of the Lenape tribes, and in Washington, D.C. on the land of the Nacotchtank and Piscataway peoples. Tree Speech is produced and co-written by Jonathan Zoutner with the Light Theater Guild. Thank you for joining Tree Speech today.